Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've just apologized now because the other offices in the building are occupied today. So there may be people going up and down, and also the phone may ring as well because there's nobody to collect it, to pick it up and answer it. So just bear that in mind, and it might distract me because it already has done so far today. So yes, my name is Christine Nicholls. I work for Community Action Northumberland. I'm a Community Development Officer and the Organisational Lead for Energy Equality. Warm Hubs is a scheme that we started over 8 years ago now. A little bit of background of how the scheme started was I was actually in a meeting in Berwick at the youth hostel. They have a very nice cafe there, or they did, and there was an elderly person, a senior person in that cafe when I arrived. I had back-to-back meetings, started at 10 o'clock and I finished at about 4 o'clock. He was there when I arrived and she was there when I was due to leave. And when I arrived, she was watching a TV that was on a loop that lasted 10 minutes, highlighting all the youth hostels in the area. And she continued to watch that loop all day. And she only had 1 cup of coffee in front of her and she didn't get anything else all day. I noticed towards the end of the day that she had a coat undone and she had a dressing gown underneath the coat, and then she had her clothes on. So basically she'd gone there to keep warm for the day. I heard from the manager that she was actually a retired nun and she didn't have any family, and she was just she would go in every single day and have a coffee, and that's all she would have, and just stay there to keep warm. So that's really how it started. So very similar to why people are talking about warm spaces now. We were talking about this 8 years ago, so I guess we were ahead of the game at that time. But fuel poverty has been around, forever. People have always been in fuel poverty, and this particular year, I guess it's going to be particularly bad for a lot of people in their homes. So that's why I think there's been more of an interest in warm hubs and more of an interest in warm spaces, creating warm spaces for people this coming winter. So what is warm hubs? Well, warm hubs is different to warm spaces, and I will highlight both of them and highlight the differences between them, because a warm space isn't necessarily a warm hub. We'd hope a warm hub is a warm space, but it doesn't follow the other way. So we have at the moment 34 warm hubs. That's buildings that are across Northumberland who are part of the warm hub scheme. Now, interestingly, we've got one in Craster, and we've also got one the other side of Craster in Beadnell, Sea Houses, so along that coast, Lesbury, Embleton, and obviously they're all dotted around all over Northumberland, 34. And Rothbury, we've got 2 in Rothbury, and I don't know if you said, Philippa, that somebody was from Rothbury, but anyway, we've got them pretty much dotted around, geographically really well spaced. The other thing about warm hubs is that we work really closely with the churches already. So probably about 9 of our warm hubs are linked directly to the church. One of them at Whittingham is actually in the church. The warm hub is the church, and we spent a lot of time with somebody called Jane, and I've forgotten the surname, she's retired now. She was a vicar at Whittingham, and she wanted to create this warm space, but there was work that needed to be done to the church to create that warm space. And so we put in kitchen facilities, etc. So you basically walk down the aisle, turn right, and it just looked like a regular church. But on a warm hub day, all the cupboards turned out and created a kitchen. So they were all hidden during the rest of the time. But then you had cookers, a bit like a caravan, I guess, and you had sinks, wash basins, everything, all unfolding, so you could create this warm hub right in the heart of the church. And somebody once said to me that he never felt so welcome in a church as in walking down the aisle to the smell of bacon sandwiches. So I think there's a clue on what you maybe need to do to increase the amount of people that are coming into your churches. Bacon sandwiches sound like the key. So what is a warm hub, and what's the difference between a warm hub and a warm space? Warm hubs are sustainable. The project's been running for 8 years. It's not a project where we just set it up for the winter because things are particularly hard. It's something that's going to be there for 20, 30, 40 years. It's a sustainable project. We start off with a warm hub by looking at the building. So Embleton, for instance, which is the church hall, has needed lots and lots of work when it wanted to join the scheme. So we took it on as part of the scheme. And so part of becoming a warm hub is to get that additional support to create that ideal venue, that warm, safe, accessible, dementia-friendly venue. So we had the church hall. It needed a huge amount of work, decoration, accessible toilets, new kitchen, a new heating system, repairs to the roof, all sorts of things. And so we worked with Embleton once they joined the scheme to create that that building so that it became more energy efficient. We use renewable initiatives where we can. So we try and fit installations that are things like air source heat pumps, which Embleton Church Hall have got. We put, as I said, accessible toilets, which I believe they leave open to most of every day, just so people who visit in the area can access their toilets. And then we created a new kitchen that met all the health and safety regulations. We went through the governance. We set up a separate bank account to the church, and basically did everything we needed to do for the building. We did an accessibility audit, an energy audit. We did a dementia awareness audit on the building, and we produced reports, and those reports are then used to access funding for that building as evidence of need. So that's the first thing we do with the warm hub. The second thing that we do is we work with volunteers. So if you've got somewhere like Embleton, which are currently doing, I'll talk about Embleton because it's a church hall and we've done an awful lot of work there. They needed, if they're providing soup and a roll, then without doubt, the volunteers that are working at Embleton needed a food safety level 2 qualification. So with warm hubs, if you join the scheme, not only do we look at supporting your building, identifying funding and all the things I've been talking about and providing the audits, but we also then support volunteers by providing free training. So you would normally pay something like, I don't know, £50 to £60 for food safety level 2. But if Embleton have got 6 people that need to do food safety, 6 volunteers, then we fund that training for them. We also funded training at Embleton for paediatric first aid, which was interesting because they're quite active in their community and they have a parent and toddler group, but they're quite disadvantaged in the fact that medical care is quite some distance. So we did paediatric first aid for those parents and for the volunteers, and have since been informed that they think it's potentially saved maybe 5 or 6 babies' lives, especially when it comes to choking. So we provide all the training that a warm hub needs. Now, every warm hub is different, and Embleton work with parent and toddlers. Some of the other warm hubs work with senior residents. Some do intergenerational work. They work with schools. Some do breakfast clubs. A warm hub can be anything you want it to be. And our job at CAN, and my job, is to make sure that all the aspirations that people have for that particular warm hub are met. So I'm a facilitator. So Embleton Warm Hub belongs to them. It's run by them and it's for the community. It's run by the volunteers for the community. And if they say that they would like to do something like the paediatric first aid, then my job is to make sure that that happens so that they get all the support that they need, because they're volunteers and we wouldn't expect them to do this go out and start looking for funding to develop their building, etc. We have experts in place that can support that and make sure that obviously they're running legally as well, and sort out insurance, things like that. So we support volunteers. Sometimes we come along to a warm hub and they may say, we don't have enough volunteers, we want to do soup and lunch, soup for lunch, soup and rolls, that type of thing, or maybe we want to do just coffee and biscuits, but we need more volunteers. So in that case, we would then organise volunteer events where we can bring people in, talk about how the scheme would run, and look at signing people up basically to help with the scheme. The building becomes the warm hub, and the volunteers obviously benefit from the training and all the other support that we were able to offer them. The final part of a warm, well, it's not really the final part, but it's the community. It's tailor-making activities that to suit that community, that village hall or that community building is serving, and looking at any gaps. So if there's yoga going on or there's other stuff going on, or let's say there's a film club on a Tuesday, but let's say we think, well, there's film on Tuesday, but there's nothing happening in the village on a Thursday, then why don't we do this on the Thursday? And we start thinking about things, we do some community consultation, and we create activities that are really targeting the group of people that where we feel the gaps are within that community. Those two things. Now, the final link, I guess, to warm hubs is that energy runs all the way through it. So energy is with the building, where we try and make an energy efficient building, because we want to reduce bills. We want that building to become more sustainable and more energy efficient, and we want to lower their carbon footprint, because that's really important at the moment. We also want our buildings to become emergency centres as well. So we are currently fitting things like photovoltaic panels, solar panels, and batteries. Some of our warm hubs have generators, which is diesel generators, which aren't brilliant, but they do operate when there's a power cut and things. So they are available then, but long term, they're not a great solution, because they produce pure carbon that goes into the atmosphere. So batteries and PV are a better option. So we've got an energy theme running through the building, and then with the volunteers, we always provide a basic energy information and access to services. So they have access to energy support, as well as information on a whole range of things. Could be NHS, could be Health Watch, could be the CAB, etc. But we provide access to services, and energy is a big part of that. So we maybe would go along, as an example, and do a demonstration on using a slow cooker. So we may be aware that 1 in 10 people at the moment are have disconnected their cooker. So those people aren't having warm food. We then provide slow cooker demonstrations which are just mini ovens, to be honest, and they cost about 3p to 5p an hour to run a slow cooker. Conventional oven costs anything from 71p to 96p an hour to run an oven. So if I was cooking a stew in the oven for an hour, 2 hours, it's going to cost me £2. If I was going to do it in a slow cooker, it's going to cost me 6p, basically. So we talk about energy efficiency and how you can save money using slow cookers. We'll do the demonstrations. And what we normally do, if they're part of the warm hub scheme, we then give everyone a free slow cooker to take home and to literally start saving money, because obviously that means that because of the low cost of slow cookers, they can actually heat and eat, hopefully this winter. And also the diversity of slow cookers, things like cooking, well, anything. Pretty much you can cook anything in a slow cooker except a pie top and Yorkshire puddings. So you can do quiches, you can do cakes, you can do puddings, you can do pretty much anything, meringues, chutney, mulled wine, jacket potatoes, roast potatoes, fries, pizzas, pasta, rice, soups, stews, whatever. It can all be cooked in the slow cooker. So, and we do that with people. So we're really keen that people see the savings that you can make from energy. So warm hubs is all about energy. It's about energy with the building, energy saving in the building, training volunteers so they can give basic energy advice, and then providing energy support for those people that attend the warm hubs, like giving out the slow cookers, or going in and doing a home audit where we can fit things like radiator reflector panels free of charge, and that will double the output of a radiator on an outside wall, that type of thing. And so it works really well. It's like a joined up way of working. Everything's linked to energy, but it starts with the building, it's then with the volunteers, and it then that filters out to the community to benefit the community. The difference between a warm hub and a warm space, so you'll have heard, and the other thing I will say at this point is that 8 years ago, we trademarked warm hubs, which wasn't something that we were keen to do, but the funder at the time was an organisation called Northern Gas Networks, and they said, we think that warm hubs is going to take off somewhere down the line. And so they said, we think you need to trademark it. So we trademarked it. So warm hubs is a bit like Costa Coffee. You'll hear it bandied around and people talking about setting up warm hubs, but I guess technically it's trademarked to Community Action Northumberland. I'm just throwing that in. We know people use it, we know people use the terms, and we know it's right across the country, but I'm just throwing it in because I've been asked to talk about that side of it. Warm spaces is something that the County Council in Northumberland are setting up. and I think places like Gateshead and Durham are doing the same, which is sort of a knee-jerk reaction to what's happening with the energy crisis at the moment. And the difference is that warm spaces are just going to be available this winter, so it's not a sustainable project, not something that's going to be there providing support year in, year out for maybe 20, 30 years. And warm spaces are also using existing buildings like churches, leisure centres, libraries, etc., to provide a warm space, exactly like I saw that person back in 8 years ago in Berwick doing herself, you know, going into the youth centre and the youth hostel and using that space. People have been using warm spaces for generations. I spoke to a 91-year-old person in Sea Houses at one of our warm hubs, and she said when she was in her 20s, she used to take a knitting and go and sit in the pub on a night to keep warm, and her and her friends, and she said she had a lemonade and that was it, and they used to sit there just to keep warm. So it's not a new thing. People have always been doing this. It's just now we're formalizing it. We're basically saying, the county council are basically saying, here's a list of places you can go where you can actually go and keep warm and maybe, you know, read or have access to coffee or whatever. And so it's formalized, and it's I guess it's a good thing, but we're already finding that it's causing a whole range of problems. If you imagine a library and you've got a librarian in there, and so people are now formally going to that place to keep warm. They were always going to do it, but now it's formal. It's on the council website that this is a place you can go to keep warm. Straight away, if you've got older people going in there, you might have people with early onset of dementia, you might have people with mental health issues, you might have people with accessibility issues. Does the role of that librarian change? Does that librarian become a carer? Is there a change of use for the building? So it's a library, but then and people hopefully will still be reading books when they go there or accessing newspapers, but has the role of that building changed? So they need to look at insurance, they need to look at their staff and make sure that the role of the staff hasn't changed, and they need to look at the role of the building and see if that's changed. They also need to look at things like safeguarding, which wouldn't normally necessarily be in place, but safeguarding is a huge issue. Because what's happening in what has already happened in other parts of the country is one local authority published a list of all these places that were going to be warm spaces, and these warm spaces are already being targeted by abusers, and somebody has already had issues with financial abuse, as a young man turned up at a community building insisting that he was the son of one of the people there, and she denied it, and he said she had dementia. He took her out of the building and he took her cards and took money out of her bank accounts. So basically what if you look at it from a vulnerability point of view, you're basically saying all these places here that are on this list are all going to be full of vulnerable people, and this is where they're going to be. And so safeguarding is absolutely essential to make sure that we don't create a space that's even more dangerous than these people actually staying at home. So there's a whole range of issues when it comes to safe spaces. It's not something that we work on, but we are aware of obviously everything that needs to be done to our warm hub scheme. But warm hubs is quite different to warm spaces. It is about the building, it is about the volunteers, and it is about making sure that we put something together that really addresses the needs of that community. We do include all the training associated with safeguarding, DBS checks, and dementia awareness training, dementia friendly building, everything associated with that. There's just, you know, there's the potential for so much to go wrong with a warm space, but if it's done properly, then I think it'll be a huge benefit to the community. But even if you've got somebody with early onset of dementia going in to use any community building, whether it's a leisure centre or a library, one of the biggest problems that people with early onset of dementia have is that they'll just go to the bathroom, then they'll turn on a tap to wash their hands, but they turn on any tap. It could be hot, could be cold. If that hot water hasn't been turned down to just above 60 or between 60 and 70, the hands go straight underneath and they get blisters, they burn their hands because they just don't understand about mixing taps. And so it's a huge problem. So in all the warm hubs, for instance, one very simple thing that we do is we turn the hot water down. that not only saves money on our bills, because let's face it, we even do it at home. You run a bath with hot, and you use all that energy to create that hot water, and then what do? You add the cold and cool it down, so you're using a huge amount of energy. So community buildings, they turn the hot water down, that becomes more dementia friendly, not just for older people but for children, and you're also saving money on your bills. So I don't know if you found any of that confusing. Probably did. So maybe I'll just stop and see if anybody wants clarification on anything that I've said so far.
Thanks, Christine. That's really useful. Any questions from anyone? Go ahead, Caroline.
Hello, thank you. That was really straightforward, and I want to ask a question about some of the churches are in a position where they really want to do something, but they don't have adequate heating, and some of them don't have a toilet. I know you already mentioned about kitchens. I'm imagining that a project that's that big, no heating, no toilet, no kitchen, is going to be something that's A, it's going to take a long time, and B, would it be something you would even want to be involved in?
Yeah, we get some easy wins and we get some not so easy wins. So it's definitely something that we would want to be involved in. We've done things like building onto the side of churches to create more manageable community spaces, things like that. You're absolutely right. It can take a long time. What we're focusing on this year is just trying to get as many warm hubs up and running and open the space up, I guess, so that people have access to that. And sometimes that means that we have to, use quite a lot of heating to get those places up to scratch, but we're funding the heating this winter. So warm hubs will pay for all the heating costs associated with creating those warm places where people can come within that warm hub building. Next year, we'll then start focusing on working on the buildings to make them more energy efficient and warmer, and hopefully start introducing renewables. But no, sometimes Embleton, which is the one I mentioned to you, that took 2 years before we actually got this all singing, all dancing, wonderful church hall, because I wouldn't say it was semi-derelict, but it was in quite a bad state. The toilet wasn't accessible. We had to put ramps in. We had to put whole new toilets in. The kitchen, again, didn't meet health and safety requirements. And the building was just generally in poor repair. The heating wasn't adequate, so we put the air source heat pump in. And so, yeah, we're not afraid of work. That's what Warm Hubs is about, getting the buildings up to scratch, because that's where your sustainability comes in. That means that building's not just going to be available for this winter, but that building is going to be warm for generations to come, and for everybody that uses it, not just if you have a Warm Hub activity.
So if someone wants to go ahead with this, how do they get in touch with you, Christine?
Well, my email is available via Philippa, so I'm happy for her to circulate that. Email is going to be the best for me because I always pick my emailers up. I'm not always available to answer the phone because I work predominantly in rural Northumberland and my phones just don't work. So it's sort of a bit pointless most of the time. It doesn't even work when I'm working from home either. So I think it worked fine in the office though, which is good. But yeah, email every time and I would definitely respond.
Yeah.
Could I just ask, in terms of where there's projects where people need quite a lot before they could set up as a warm hub, we've got quite a few churches that are desperate for toilets. Toilets has become one of the main topics of conversation in this project. Would you work with the churches on looking at fundraising from other sources? Is that how it works? So, I mean, for example, Benefact Trust, we've had doing one of these Zoom sessions, and they're one of the, I think, probably key funders for churches, and I think there was a few that were keen to look at that after we'd done the introduction session with them. So would you kind of work together with the church to look at other sources of funding?
Yeah, so it's a two-way street with churches. On the one hand, there are funds that are only applicable for churches. So I've worked, because I was a funding officer before I started all this, and I put in those secondary glazing to protect stained glass windows, things like that. We've done church roofs, we've done all that type of thing. So I have so there's a list of funders that potentially fund churches. Joycey Trust is one that springs to mind in Northumberland. So yeah, that's fine. There's but then there's there's the other funders like the lottery, I think, and Community Foundation, who aren't as keen to fund churches. However, they will fund community activities or anything associated with the warm hub. So if the church became a warm hub and it was there for people to keep warm and not for religious activities, then I don't see any reason why these funds aren't available to all churches, because it's an awful thing to say, but it's the religious side of things that funders aren't always keen to support. But if it's a warm hub, then you're basically creating a community building. That's how we see our warm hub churches. They're community buildings. Warm hubs runs really well, runs parallel with churches by providing a safe, warm space. And so we have a similar, ethos when it comes to providing support for people. It's just that with warm hubs, we don't have the religious side of the activities. We just provide that safe place.
So, for example, if you had churches who were involved with Rural Churches for Everyone coming forward, we're a Heritage Lottery funded project. So it's about the church buildings rather than increasing congregations. So each of those churches will be part of a sustainability plan. So having that built in, we want to increase the community use is then the evidence as well to the funder that they're doing that kind of wider activity. Yeah. And
I think the key certainly with warm hubs is that funders are very aware of the scheme. It's won lots of awards. It's won national awards. It's recommended by the Prince's Trust. It's the only energy scheme that's supported and recommended by Ofgem, who are the energy regulators. So it's well known with the funders, and I think I can say at this point that every application we've ever put in for a warm hub has never been rejected. So we've done really well when it comes to being part of the scheme. But we've got professionals that know how to access funding, how to identify it, and how to complete the forms. Down the line, we work with our volunteers with funding applications. So we're sort of leading at the beginning, but we would hope after the first year or 2 years that volunteers are able to access and identify their own funding, because that's what makes a project sustainable. They become their own little support scheme, and they can do everything themselves, everything that we can do, basically. That's the idea. It's like sending your child off to university equipped to be able to, we've spent all this time equipping you to actually go out there and live on your own or go to university and to survive. And I think we see the warm-ups are very similar to that. It's a bit of a family, and we try to work with everybody, all our volunteers, to make sure that if we ever had to walk away from the scheme, it would continue, absolutely, without a doubt.
I think just whilst I'm thinking about it, it's worth saying as well that we have been talking to Andy Dean at CAN about the solar. You mentioned the energy stuff, and I think it sounds like there's going to be more stuff. So I think 2 or 3 of our Rural Churches for Everyone churches are involved in the work you've been doing so far around looking at feasibility for solar stuff, and there's going to be more, I believe, in the new year, more information coming out. And we've talked to Andy about having a Rural Churches for Everyone specific event to talk about that, so that all of that tying together. And the Church of England has a net zero carbon target for 2030, so it's all
brilliant,
all coming together. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else you could say at this point about the solar project, or
no. I am involved in it because it's energy, but Andy's definitely leading on that. So we I think we're waiting for funding to come through, is my understanding. Just
for others to be aware that there should be something happening in, I think, probably late January, early February, around an event specifically to do with that for Rural Churches for Everyone churches. Did anyone have any more questions? Okay,
that's a good thing.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it was very clear. It wasn't confusing at all. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover, or do you think we've got through the main stuff?
No, I did think maybe 30 minutes. That's usually about right. But I think if you'd like any more information on just creating a warm space this winter, then you can contact me and I can put you in touch with the person that can help you set that up with the county council. And they're doing that now. The people do keep moving around in jobs, so the person that was in charge of warm spaces has left, but there's somebody new now in post, or you can just contact the council yourself. I've really been pushing the council to offer financial support to buildings to open as warm spaces this winter, just to see how it goes. So that, and obviously if any of the churches are in areas where there's community benefit funds from wind farms, things like that, like Embleton, for instance, Eglingham, then, you know, there's opportunities of additional funding from there. But yeah, the council were offering some financial support to buildings opening up as warm spaces. So even if it covered your heating bill, so that you could really turn them up, or maybe it's not always a question of just turning it up. Maybe you can't ever generate the amount of heat you need, but certainly there should be some financial support if you wanted to go down that warm space route this winter.
Okay, yeah, that's great. That's good to know. What I'll do is I will, everyone who's here, I'll send Christine's email address around afterwards. I'm also just going to share in the chat the page where you can find all of the recordings of these sessions. So this one will go on in the next few days, and there's 4 other sessions you can have a look at. So that'll stay on there, and then we'll also get supplemented by the toolkit, the Rural Churches for Everyone toolkit, which we're putting together. So there'll be information there. Also do, as I say, keep an eye out, because we'll be doing a session with Can in the new year about solar stuff. Any other questions? Any of that prompted any final thoughts or questions from anyone? Okay, in that case then, Christine, thank you very much. That's been really useful, and yeah, I think you might be hearing from people in the future. And yeah, I'll share your address. And would it be okay if we put your email address with the video, just so that people can? Yeah, okay, yeah. That's great. We'll do that then.
Okay.
That's brilliant.
Well, good
Thank
luck.
you very much.
Good luck. Hope it all works out
you.
for you this winter. Keep an eye on those people in your areas, because they're going to need all the help they can get. If you do come, as a final thing, if you do come across anybody within your parish or your area that does need additional support, there's funding obviously from the government, but we have an NG team that's separate from Warm Hubs that can help people. We can access additional funding as well. So if you come across any of your parishioners that are really in dire straits this winter, please get in touch, because there's loads and loads of help that we can give people this winter so that they can keep safe.
Okay. That's great. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye, Caroline.
Bye.